My name is Brittany. I've changed some names and kept certain details private for personal reasons. But what I'm about to tell you really happened. It wasn't a dream or some story I made up. It was real. It was paranormal. And it was the scariest thing I've ever lived through. What happened to me changed everything. The way I see the world, the way I trust what's real, even the person I became after. It was the summer of 2011. I was 20 years old, and Jason, my fiancé, was 24. We were already living together in a quiet Midwestern town. Jason worked as a plant manager at a local factory, and I handled paperwork in the office. We didn't have much, but we were steady, saving every spare dollar for our wedding, a honeymoon in Hawaii, and the life we dreamed of building together. Our plan was simple, a small, heartfelt ceremony in my parents' backyard. They lived in an old Victorian farmhouse surrounded by tall trees and a weathered white fence where my sisters and I grew up. My younger sister, Ashley, 17, artistic, and a delightfully goth, helped me craft every decoration by hand. We made lace garlands, thrifted candle holders, and delicate centerpieces from things we found in secondhand stores. It wasn't fancy, but it was perfect. By then, I already had just about everything for the wedding. The decorations, the rings, the flowers, even the food planned out. But there was still one big thing missing, a wedding gown. I'd been putting it off, mostly because every dress I liked was way out of our budget, and I didn't want to spend a fortune on something I'd only wear once. Still, time was running out, 3 weeks until the wedding, and I had nothing to walk down the aisle in. That's when Ashley came to the rescue. "There's this thrift store in the next town over," she said. "They've got these vintage wedding dresses, like perfect ones from the 80s and early 90s, and they're actually inexpensive. You'd love it. The whole place feels like stepping back in time." That Saturday, my mom, Ashley, and I drove down the old highway, weaving through farmland until the road disappeared into the woods. There were a few old houses converted into antique shops, but the one Ashley meant was tucked deeper in the trees, small, hidden, and almost forgotten. It looked like a little Victorian cottage. Wind chimes hung from the porch, flower pots overflowed with bright blooms, and tiny ornaments lined the walkway. A faded wooden sign swung gently above the door, its hand-painted letters curling with age. The moment we stepped inside, it felt like crossing into another era. The air smelled faintly of cedar and something floral. Every corner overflowed with delicate antiques, lace doilies, glass perfume bottles, brass candlesticks, and shelves lined with porcelain dolls. There were racks of vintage clothes mixed among the furniture, soft fabrics brushing against carved wood. In the far corner, a row of wedding gowns and old ball gowns stood neatly on display, each one draped in a clear plastic wrap like something freshly pressed from the cleaners. Their silks and satins gleamed under the amber light, untouched by dust or time. Everything in that shop, the furniture, the clothes, even the air itself, felt impossibly well cared for, as if someone had been tending to it all with quiet, obsessive devotion. Heavy velvet curtains concealed the fitting rooms, and at the center stood an ornate antique mirror framed in gold leaf, its surface just slightly warped with age. Soft jazz drifted through the room from a small radio behind the counter, its notes crackling faintly beneath the hum of an old ceiling fan. The music wrapped around everything, giving the place a strange, hazy sort of charm, part dream, part memory. Behind the counter stood the shopkeeper, a woman who looked like a blend of bohemian, hippie, and mystic. Layered skirts swayed around her ankles, Strands of beads clinked softly as she moved, and her gray streaked hair tumbled freely over her shoulders. She smelled of patchouli and sandalwood, the kind of scent that seemed to linger in the air long after she passed. She greeted us kindly, her voice low and melodic, carrying that same smooth rhythm as the jazz. "Looking for something special?" she asked with a soft smile. Before I could even answer, she added, "Something for a wedding, maybe?" Ashley and I froze, glancing at each other. I hadn't said a word about the wedding. Still, the woman's eyes seemed to sparkle with quiet certainty, as if she'd been waiting for me, as if she already knew exactly what I'd come for. And then I saw it, the dress. It stood alone in the corner, displayed on one of those headless mannequins used in bridal shops. A pale, fabric-covered torso mounted on a brass stand, shaped like a woman waiting to be filled. The way it stood there made it feel almost alive, like it was watching the room without eyes. A shaft of sunlight streamed through the front window, landing directly on it, turning the gown into the centerpiece of the shop, as if the light itself had chosen it. Pristine white, with short sleeves that draped gracefully over the shoulders. The bodice shimmered with tiny seed pearls, sequins, and clear Austrian crystals, the kind of intricate hand beading that screamed late 80s luxury. A pair of long gloves and a delicate tiara with a veil rested beside it. "It's only been worn once," the shopkeeper told me. She produced a yellowed receipt from a box behind the counter. May 1985, purchased for $5,000. Then she smiled faintly. "You can have it for $100. I looked at the tag, size 6. I frowned. I was a size 3. It looked like it might hang a little loose on me, but that could be fixed. I figured if it was too big, I could always have it altered at the cleaners. I decided to try it on. At first, the fabric felt roomy, loose around my waist and shoulders, exactly what I'd expected. Then, as I adjusted the straps, the satin began to draw in, just slightly, tightening around me as though it were shifting. I froze. It wasn't uncomfortable, not exactly, but it felt alive. The fabric molded to my shape, smoothing itself perfectly against my skin. Within seconds, it fit. Flawlessly, too flawlessly, like it had been made for me. A strange chill washed over me, and for a moment, I felt the air in the room change. The sunlight that had been streaming through the front window dimmed suddenly, as if a cloud had passed, or maybe something else. I turned toward the mirror. For a split second, my reflection didn't move with me. It was only a flicker, barely long enough to process. But when it happened, the eyes staring back weren't mine. They were brown, dark, almost resentful. I blinked hard, and everything looked normal again. My heart was pounding, but I forced a laugh. Nerves, I told myself, just nerves. Maybe that's why I thought, for a split second, that my own blue eyes had flashed a different color in the reflection. When I finally unzipped the gown, I glanced at the tag again. Size 3. I just stood there, staring. Had it always said that? Or had I imagined the whole thing? Either way, the gown was perfect, and I bought it. That afternoon, Jason was out with friends, and I was home alone. I kept thinking about the gown, how perfectly it had fit, how strange and beautiful it was. I told myself I just wanted to see it again, to feel that soft fabric one more time. Excitement bubbled in my chest as I unzipped the garment bag and lifted it out. I couldn't resist. I had to try it on again. I slipped it over my head, and the moment it settled around my body, the air shifted, just like it had in the shop. Only this time, it was stronger, heavier. The warmth in the hallway vanished, replaced by a sharp, unnatural chill. Outside, the light through the windows dimmed, turning gray and lifeless, like a mass of heavy clouds had swallowed the sun. It didn't make sense. It was the middle of May, and the sky had been perfectly clear just minutes before. Then, in the mirror, it happened again, but worse. The face staring back wasn't mine. It was clearer now, undeniable. Her skin looked a shade paler, her features sharper, wrong, and her eyes, they weren't brown anymore. They were black, solid black, without a trace of white. And then she smiled, not a soft or polite smile, but something slow, twisted, knowing, an evil grin that didn't belong to me. A chill ran through me, and before I could move, then I felt it, something crawling, then another, a wriggling pulse spreading across my back. My hands flew to the seams, but it was too late. The fabric itself seemed to bulge, and from inside the dress, cockroaches and spiders burst out, spilling through the stitching and pouring down my skin, skittering over my arms and racing down my legs, as if the gown had been hiding them all along. I screamed, ripping the gown off, stomping and swatting in terror. When it was over, I looked down, and there was nothing. The floor was spotless. The gown lay perfectly still, white and immaculate, as if none of it had ever happened. Then, just as suddenly as it had darkened, the atmosphere shifted again. The chill lifted, sunlight spilled back through the windows, warm and bright, and the house felt normal, alive again. I stood there shaking, the dress pooled at my feet, wondering if I was losing my mind. I called my mom, my voice trembling so badly I could barely get the words out. She was a devout evangelical, the kind of woman who believed prayer could break evil, who trusted fully in the power of Christ. She didn't hesitate. When she arrived, she reached for the gown and paused. For just a heartbeat, she froze, her fingers hovering above the fabric, like something unseen was pushing back. A flicker of unease crossed her face, but then she took a steady breath and her expression hardened into calm resolve. Whatever had made her hesitate was gone. Her faith had taken over. She laid her hands firmly on the dress. "In the name of Jesus," she said, her voice strong and sure. "Whatever evil clings to this dress, it has no power here. The blood of Christ breaks every darkness and every curse." Her confidence filled the room. For a moment, even I believed nothing evil could stand against her prayers. When she was done praying, she let out a slow breath and gave me a small smile. "Maybe it wasn't anything supernatural," she said gently. "That shop was full of old things. Dust, spiders, who knows what else? Maybe you just got spooked." She patted my hand and added, "Take the dress to the cleaners, sweetheart. Get it freshened up and you'll feel better." So I did. For a few days, things seemed fine. Then the nightmares began. In the first one, I was walking down an aisle, but not toward Jason. Everything around me looked different, older. The flowers, the hairstyles, even the music, all straight out of the 1980s. The man waiting for me wasn't Jason either. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with a thick Burt Reynolds-style mustache and cold brown eyes that didn't match the smile on his face. I was wearing the gown, but something was wrong. I didn't feel like me. It was as if I were trapped in someone else's body. Seeing through her eyes, people in the pews whispered a name I'd never heard before. Anna. Then the dream shifted. His smile vanished. The room darkened, the air turned heavy, and his expression twisted into something cruel. He grabbed me, his action sudden, harsh, and terrifyingly real. I tried to scream, but no sound came. The darkness closed in, and then, in the dream, I was unalived. I woke up gasping, heart pounding, my throat sore, as if I'd been screaming for real. The nightmares kept coming, each one darker, more violent than the last. He'd shout, grab, pull me into shadows. Every time I wore the gown, every time I became her, and every time I ended up unalived. Sometimes I'd wake up shaking, drenched in sweat, and once or twice, faint bruises appeared on my arms and shoulders. They'd fade by afternoon, like they'd never been there. It was now 1 week before the wedding. My older sister, Amanda, who was 31 at the time, had flown in from Florida a few days earlier with her husband and their 2 little kids. The kids were staying back at our parents' old Victorian farmhouse with Mom and Dad for the week, while Amanda stayed with me to help with last-minute wedding prep. Meanwhile, Jason went off with his buddies, and Amanda's husband joined them for Jason's bachelor weekend, a short trip to the lake that left the house to us girls. That night, it was Ashley, her best friend Emily, and my older sister Amanda and me. We decided to have a girls' night. Pizza, cheap wine, old movies, and endless wedding talk, somewhere between laughter and planning the playlist. The conversation drifted to wedding details, the flowers, the music, the catering, and finally, the dress. Ashley already knew what had happened with the dress, but Amanda and Emily didn't. So, after a couple glasses of wine, I told them everything. How I'd found the gown in that old vintage shop, how perfect it had looked, how strange it felt when it seemed to mold to my body, and how the air in the room had gone cold and dark when I tried it on again at home. Amanda laughed at first, thinking I was teasing, but when she saw I wasn't smiling, the room got quiet. I tried to brush it off. "What if this dress is cursed?" I said, half joking. Ashley, being her usual goth self, with her chipped black nail polish and fascination for creepy things, grinned. "Honestly, that'd be kinda cool," she said. But Emily, raised strict Catholic and coming from a big family full of clergy, didn't laugh. After years of Catholic school, she knew church history, theology, rituals, even exorcism, inside and out. And yet, even though she was Ashley's friend, I knew from our own conversations that her strict upbringing had made her just as obsessed with the occult, demonology, tarot, witchcraft, folklore. She knew all of it, as well as she knew church rituals and history. Her voice dropped low. "No, seriously, that kind of stuff can happen," she said. "You bring home old things, especially from antique stores, and sometimes they bring something with them." That really freaked me out, and I didn't even want to mention that I had nightmares. I was too scared to mention it. Amanda rolled her eyes, swirling her wine. "Oh, please, you don't really believe that, do you? You Catholics are always so superstitious." Emily's expression hardened, but she didn't reply. The room went still for a second. Even Ashley stopped smiling. The wedding day came, and everything went beautifully. At first, Jason had always been the calm one. Big guy, steady hands, the kind who never raised his voice and only drank on special occasions. That quiet patience was what made me fall in love with him in the first place. But that night, he wasn't himself. At the reception, he kept drinking heavily, more than I'd ever seen him touch alcohol before. His laughter grew louder, his movements sharper, when I leaned in and gently said, "Hey, maybe slow down on the alcohol a little." He turned on me. "It's my wedding. I'll drink if I damn well want to," he snapped. The words hit hard, not just because of what he said, but how he said it. His voice sounded different, rough, older. For a split second, it didn't sound like Jason at all. The music was loud, laughter filling the air, and guests nearby, who caught his words over the noise, laughed nervously, thinking he was joking. I forced a smile and tried to brush it off, but deep down, I felt that same cold ripple again, the one I'd felt the first time I put on the dress. Then came the cake cutting. I playfully pulled the slice away from him, teasing, like couples always do. But something changed in an instant. His face twisted with rage, sudden and ugly. He slapped the plate from my hand, sending cake splattering across the floor, then grabbed the table and flung what was left of the cake across the room. Gasps cut through the music. Jason stormed off, shoving past guests. His best man ran after him, trying to calm him down. But Jason turned, grabbed him by the collar, and shoved him so hard he crashed into a table. Chairs toppled. People screamed. I was humiliated, embarrassed, and completely mortified. Every single person in that room was staring at me. My parents, his family, co-workers, friends, all frozen in shock. The air was thick with that awful, awkward silence people make when they don't know what to do. My dream wedding had turned into a nightmare in seconds. And to make it worse, someone had been filming. The whole thing. The video's still out there somewhere. Grainy, shaky footage of my wedding collapsing in real time. Every now and then, it resurfaces online, and I can't bring myself to watch it. You can see the exact moment his face changes, like it wasn't really him anymore. The police were called. By then, I was sitting at the head table, hands trembling, my stomach in knots. I felt exposed, like the floor had dropped out from under me, and everyone was standing around staring. The music had stopped, replaced by low murmurs and uneasy laughter. People huddled in small groups, whispering, glancing my way, but pretending not to. The whole room felt heavy, awkward, like the celebration had been sucked dry. The reception ended early. There was no saving it. The officers said Jason had just had too much to drink. It happens, one of them told me gently, but it didn't feel like that, not to me. When Jason finally came back inside, his tie undone and his face pale, he apologized, to me, to everyone. He looked dazed, like he'd just woken up from a bad dream. People nodded, tried to smile, but the mood had already died. One by one, guests began to leave, mumbling polite goodbyes. By the end of the night, we told ourselves it was the alcohol. Everyone did, but deep down, I wasn't so sure. This wasn't the kind of thing that happened to me. I'd always had a good life, a normal, decent life, nothing even close to this. And now here I was, living through the most embarrassing, humiliating moment imaginable. That night, we stayed at my parents' house before leaving for our honeymoon in the morning. Jason apologized again, gentle, quiet, almost like the man I'd fallen in love with. I wanted to believe him. We were trying to reconnect, to let go of everything that had gone wrong at the wedding. But as the night went on, something about him changed. His voice grew sharp, his breathing heavier, his movements tense and agitated. The calm, patient man I knew was gone, replaced by someone cold, almost unrecognizable. The anger in his eyes didn't even seem human. Then, without warning, he grabbed me, his hands tightening around my neck. I struggled to breathe, trying to push him away, but his strength was unreal. The dim moonlight spilled across his face, and my heart stopped. It wasn't Jason anymore. It was the man from my nightmares, older, with that thick mustache and those same merciless brown eyes. In full fear for my life mode, I reached for anything I could find in the dark to defend myself. My fingers brushed against a vase on the nightstand, and I swung with everything I had. It shattered, and he collapsed to the floor. I screamed, pure panic, until my dad and brother-in-law broke down the door. They dragged him off me, yelling his name, but Jason just stared blankly, like he wasn't really there. The police were called again, and Jason was arrested for DV. They said it must have been the alcohol, that he'd lost control. But deep down, I knew better. The marriage was over before it even began. A few weeks later, while Jason sat in jail, I couldn't stop thinking about the dress. It felt cursed, like everything that had gone wrong started the moment I put it on. Still, part of me clung to reason. Maybe it was just bad luck, bad timing. Either way, I wanted it out of my life. I decided to take it back to the shop and ask for a refund. Ashley insisted on coming with me, and Emily offered to drive. The three of us headed back to that little thrift store, the one that had once looked so charming and full of life. But when we pulled up, my stomach dropped. The flowers that had once overflowed from the porch were now nothing but brittle stems. The wind chimes were gone. The windows were boarded shut, and the faded wooden sign that once hung above the door had vanished. Only two rusted hooks swung in the wind where it used to be. Ashley pushed open the front door. It groaned loudly, echoing through the empty space. Inside, it was like stepping into a tomb. The air was heavy with dust and mold. Everything was still there. The lace doilies, perfume bottles, dolls, old lamps. But now they were coated in filth, blanketed with cobwebs. The velvet curtains were shredded, and the gold-framed mirror stood cracked and fogged. Each step we took stirred up dust and sent spiders skittering across the floorboards. Emily yelped when one dropped from the ceiling onto her shoulder. The place felt abandoned for decades, not weeks. But how? How was this place abandoned for decades when I was just here with Ashley and my mom a month ago? Did we imagine it? Am I losing my mind? We were shaken and hungry, so we stopped at a little diner down the road, the kind that looked stuck in the 1960s. The neon sign outside flickered, half the letters burned out. Inside, the air smelled like burnt coffee and fried onions. The booths were cracked red vinyl, and a dusty jukebox sat in the corner, humming low, but not playing. An older couple worked there, the woman behind the counter and the man at the grill. They looked like they'd been there forever, moving in quiet rhythm, not needing to speak much. When the waitress poured our coffee, I asked, "Hey, do you know what happened to that antique shop down the road? The one with all the flowers out front?" She stopped mid-pour. The man at the grill looked over, his expression tightening. "That place?" he asked, his voice rough. "You girls didn't go in there, did you?" My stomach dropped. "Yeah," I said, "a few weeks ago." "Why?" The waitress set the coffee pot down slowly. "That shop's been closed for years. The woman who owned it disappeared after her daughter was unalived by her husband. Happened on their wedding night. Real tragic. That was back in '85. Ashley and Emily stared at her, frozen. I felt the blood drain from my face. I reached into my purse and pulled out the old invoice for the dress. The paper had yellowed a little, but the handwriting was still clear. Under the faded, paid in full stamp was something I swear hadn't been there before. Anna Thompson. My hands shook. Anna, I whispered. That's what they called me in the nightmares. Emily covered her mouth, whispering a prayer. You need to get rid of that dress, she said quietly. Now, Ashley didn't say a word, but her eyes were wide, her face pale. She just nodded. The waitress and the cook watched us leave in silence, like they already knew there was nothing good waiting for us. We drove straight to the library. The air inside was cold and smelled of old paper and polish. The librarian took us to a back room filled with humming machines, those old microfiche readers that looked like a mix between a projector and a computer. Ashley fed the reel in, and the screen glowed faint blue. We scrolled through years of local newspapers until Emily suddenly gasped. There it was, the headline, ghostly and faded. Local bride, unalived by husband, hours after ceremony, May 1985. My heart was pounding as the image came into focus on the microfiche screen. The article was old, grainy, but clear enough. The bride in the picture was wearing my dress, and standing next to her was the same man from my nightmares. That old, creepy man with the mustache and those dark, lifeless eyes. My throat went dry. That's him, I whispered. That's the man from my nightmares. Ashley leaned in, her face pale. Oh my God, she breathed. Emily covered her mouth, whispering a prayer under her breath. None of us said a word. We just stared at that picture, frozen. There were more photos in the news article, shots of random guests, and in one of them was the shopkeeper, the same woman who'd sold me the dress. The caption said she was Anna's mother. Emily stepped forward, quiet, gothic. She wasn't just confident, she was very well versed in everything that had to do with the occult. She had also dabbled in witchcraft. She was an encyclopedia of exorcism rites and demonology, every bit of it learned in defiance of her strict Catholic upbringing. She didn't bother explaining how she knew. We already understood enough to trust her judgment. She just stared at the dress, her expression tightening. It's cursed, she said finally, and whatever's attached to it won't let go on its own. Her voice dropped, calm in a way that made it even worse. The only way to end this is with an exorcism ritual. So we did. A few nights later, after sunset, the three of us, Emily, Ashley, and I, slipped out behind my parents' farmhouse. 10 acres of open land stretched out around us, silent except for the wind and the crickets. We had to be careful. My parents, especially my mom, were strict evangelicals, the kind who believed anything remotely Catholic was pagan superstition, even sinful. If they knew what we were about to do, they would have prevented us from performing the ritual for sure. Emily set the dress into the metal bin with deliberate calm, then knelt and poured holy salt onto the ground, shaping it into a crucifix. She placed the bin at its center. From her black leather bag came white and black candles, a bottle of holy water, a crucifix, a rosary, a Bible, even a small statue of the Virgin Mary, all blessed, all handled like sacred weapons. She lit the candles one by one, white, then black, their flames shivering in the dark as she set a stick of incense smoking beside the bin. Then she began chanting in Latin. Ave Maria, I recognized. The rest, I didn't. But Emily knew every word by heart, her voice weaving through the night like something ancient. Her prayers were calm, commanding. as if she'd done this 100 times before. I'd grown up with my mother's evangelical prayers, loud, emotional, straight from the heart, with nothing but a Bible and desperation. But this felt different, ritualistic, powerful, terrifying. The air itself seemed to hum, full of a weight and energy I'd never felt before. For a moment, standing there in the candlelight, it felt like the three of us were witches huddled together, performing something forbidden in the dead of night. At first, nothing happened. Then, as she sprinkled the first drops of holy water, the fabric started to curl and twist, almost like it was alive. A faint, shrill sound rose from it, soft at first, then sharper, louder, until it became a full, chilling scream. The dress jerked and writhed inside the bin, as if the water itself was burning it. It was the kind of sound that made your blood run cold, like something unholy was fighting to stay. Emily didn't waver. Her voice grew stronger, the rhythm of her prayer faster, more forceful. Ashley clung to my arm, terrified, but Emily stood unshaken, her eyes fixed on the dress as she sprinkled holy water again and again. Then, as she poured the last of the holy water and struck the match, the fire roared to life. The dress went up instantly, the flames curling high into the night. For a heartbeat, we saw it, a dark shadow rising from the burning fabric, twisting like smoke before vanishing into the air. And then, silence, deep, still, and clean, like the whole world had just exhaled. Emily crossed herself and whispered one final line of prayer. Ashley and I stood there in shock, hearts pounding, realizing what we'd just witnessed, and how Emily's powerful ritual had done what nothing else could. For the first time in weeks, the air around me felt lighter. The heaviness was gone. The dress, and whatever darkness clung to it, had finally been destroyed. But Emily wasn't finished. She turned to us, her face pale but calm. "We can't leave it here," she said. "It has to be buried somewhere no one will ever find it." So, in the dead of night, we drove to the old graveyard on the edge of town. The iron gates creaked as we slipped inside, flashlights trembling in our hands. The air smelled of earth and death, and the wind whispered through the trees like voices that didn't want us there. Emily led the way, sure of every step. She found an empty patch of ground near a crumbling stone angel and began to dig with a small shovel from her trunk. When the hole was deep enough, she placed the metal bin, ashes, dress, and all, inside, sprinkled more holy water, and whispered a short prayer in Latin before covering it. When it was done, we stood in silence. The night was unnervingly still, but peaceful somehow. It felt final. None of us spoke on the drive home, but deep down, I knew Emily was right. Whatever that thing had been, it was finally where it belonged, and I prayed it would stay there forever. The curse was gone, but so was Jason. After our wedding night, he was never the same. Whatever darkness had touched him, it didn't leave quietly. It left a mark, deep and twisted. 7 years after he came out of prison, Jason was unpredictable, confused, paranoid, scared of things that weren't there. The darkness didn't possess him anymore, but it messed him up mentally, shattered something inside him. Even his family turned on me. They didn't know anything about the cursed dress or what we survived. And even though he attacked me, they blamed me anyway, said I'd broken him, said I'd brought darkness into his life. They shut me out completely. And Jason, he kept slipping. He became homeless, started drinking, shaking, wandering the streets at night. I'd hear things, that he talked to himself, that he'd scream at nothing, that he'd sit alone mumbling my name under his breath like it hurt him to say it. I wanted to help him, but every time I remembered that night, I froze. I knew it hadn't really been him. It was the demon that had taken over. Still, in the end, I had to let him go. Years passed, and he only fell deeper. Rehab, jail, the streets. The last time I saw him was outside a gas station, a hollowed-out version of the man I'd loved. Our eyes met for a second, then whatever flicker was there faded. I cried all night. After Jason, every relationship I've tried to have just falls apart. Maybe it's nothing, or maybe it's something left behind from that curse, a shadow that never really let me go. Now it's just me, my aging parents, and the animals in that old farmhouse. After everything that happened, the quiet feels different, heavier, like the walls remember. I still think about Jason sometimes, and that cursed dress. And I've learned one thing I'll never forget. Don't ever buy anything used. That bargain can cost you far more than money. Thank you for listening. Please hit like and subscribe for more stories. And tell me in the comments if you've ever had a creepy experience like this.